Chapter 1201. After repelling the people from the blissful demon palace, Chu Xiu's side heaved a sigh of relief. When Chu Xiu saw Ming Xuanyu leading his men to flee, he knew that the relationship between the blissful demon palace and Angela wasn't that close. They were merely united because of mutual benefits. Chu Xiu didn't know what method Angela had used to make the blissful demon palace help him. Now that Angela had been driven away by Qingdi, the blissful demon palace would naturally not take the initiative to provoke them. Qingdi shook his head as he walked over. He said, "Not bad. The strength of this Daluotian cultivator is truly powerful. His path of martial cultivation is somewhat different from that of the lower realms. However, this person is simply too weak. The outcome of the battle has yet to be determined, yet he has already fled." Hearing Qingdi's words, everyone present was speechless. This was still considered the outcome of the battle to be determined? They had personally witnessed how Angela was crushed by Qingdi. It was truly a miserable sight. In such a situation, if Angela didn't flee, he would easily be hammered to death by Qingdi. Chu Xiu walked over and bowed to Qingdi. He said, "Alliance Master Qin, many thanks." Qingdi waved his hand and said, "There's no need to be so polite. You brought me to the Daluotian, and I helped you eliminate your opponents. It's completely reasonable." "Oh, that's right, Chu Xiu, I'll leave that brat Xiaoshalu with you for the time being. Help me look after him. I plan to travel around the Daluotian and search for some inspiration to make a breakthrough. I'll also find someone to spar with." The corners of Chu Xiu's mouth twitched. Likely, that last bit was what Qingdi truly wanted. However, Chu Xiu still warned, "Alliance Master Qin, the Daluotian Empire is different from the lower realms. There are countless experts in the eastern, western, southern, and northern regions. There are several martial immortal level experts in every region. It is best to be careful." Although Chu Xiu's ability to cause trouble was no worse than Qingdi's, Chu Xiu's and Qingdi's were two different things. Everything that Chu Xiu had done was either related to his interests or his reputation. As for Qingdi, he simply wanted to find someone to fight with, so he wanted to go out and have fun. He wasn't Chu Xiu's subordinate, so Chu Xiu naturally couldn't control him. He could only give him some advice. Qingdi nodded and said, "Rest assured, I know what I'm doing. Although I am a battle-hungry person, I am not brainless." After saying those words, Qingdi suddenly sighed. He said, "Truth be told, if you hadn't brought me to the Daluotian Empire, I really wouldn't know what my next step would be." Chu Xiu was startled. Qingdi's current strength could already be considered to be at the half-step martial immortal realm. Furthermore, his physical body was very powerful, and his battle power was outstanding. What was he still confused about? Qingdi pointed to himself and said, "In the entire lower realms, I am actually the most special one. Although you also train in the true fire body refinement technique, I can tell that you have trained in a lot of things. There are many paths, and every single one of them will lead you to the pinnacle." Chu Xiu smiled bitterly. Having too many paths was not a good thing. When he was making a breakthrough to the profound access realm, he had felt confused because he had too many paths. Qingdi continued, "There are many paths that you can choose from. Yi Xiaonan, the old heavenly master, and that old fart from the Ying family, or rather, all the existences in the lower realms that have reached the profound access realm know what path they should take. However, I am the only one who doesn't. Ever since I began training, I have known that no one will accompany me. I will have to do it alone. In the lower realms, I actually made a total of 3 breakthroughs. The first time was when I condensed my true fire body refinement realm. I failed to make a breakthrough to the true fire spirit refinement realm. In the end, I turned to body refinement and succeeded. That was the first time. The second time was not long after I fought against that Heavenly Gate Divine General that you killed. I reached major success in body refinement, and became invincible against those of the same cultivation. The third time was the one from before. I assimilated my body with the world, and was able to use the power of the world to fight against half-step martial immortals. These 3 times were all incomparably dangerous, and all of them were coincidences. So whether or not I can wait until the 4th breakthrough, when my fleshly body becomes a sage, which is comparable to an immortal's body. Even I am not sure. The Daoyuotian continent is incomparably vast, with countless experts. Whether or not I can take another step in the path of martial cultivation will depend on this. I have already instructed the World Alliance to keep a low profile. I will return in a year's time. However, if I don't return in a year's time, help me out a bit and let that brat Xie Xiaolu inherit the position of World Alliance Master. I have offended many people in the lower realms with my bad temper. When I am gone, there will inevitably be people who will cause trouble for the World Alliance. Hearing Chen Qingdi's parting words, Xie Xiaolu's eyes turned red. With a trembling voice he said, "Master!" Pow! Chen Qingdi directly hit him on the head and scolded. "I'm not dead yet. Why are you crying for me? Cultivate properly here. When I return in a year's time, if you still haven't made a breakthrough, I will smash open your skull with a hammer, and see why I took in an idiot like you." After saying that, Emperor Chen Qingdi took a step forward. Suddenly, there was an explosion in the air, and his figure disappeared. Xie Xiaolu let out a long breath and said, "Brother Chu, please arrange a place for me. I will go into closed-door cultivation right now." Chu Xiu patted his shoulder and said, "Don't worry. Alliance Master Chen established the World Alliance from scratch in the lower realms. He fought his way to where he is now, and the dangers he faced are no less than those in the Daoyuotian continent. Since he was fine in the lower realms, it will be the same in the Daoyuotian continent. Although the path he walked is powerful, he is destined to pay more than ordinary people." Xie Xiaolu shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "I'm not worried about my master, I'm worried about myself. If I really don't make a breakthrough in a year's time, with my master's temper, he will really beat me up with a hammer." Chu Xiu. After arranging for Xie Xiaolu to go into closed-door cultivation, Chu Xiu also began to arrange for others to reinforce the formations in this stronghold. After experiencing this matter, Chu Xiu actually felt a sense of crisis. Xian Jialua, a half-step martial immortal, and a blissful demon palace's sub-palace, had already caused such chaos here. They even had to find reinforcements from the lower realms. This was indeed quite difficult. Chu Xiu was also helpless against this kind of crushing strength. The Daoyuotian continent had developed for tens of thousands of years, but how much time did they have for them to develop here? A few years or a few decades. Facing pure strength, other than steadily increasing one's own strength to resist, there was no other way. This kind of thing couldn't be taken lightly. Right now, the only thing that could be considered a trump card was Wei Shuya controlling the rootless sacred flame and pretending to be a martial immortal. To be honest, this move was very useful, but it could only be used once or twice. A fox could borrow the tiger's might, but only once. If it was used a few more times, the tiger's might would completely disappear. After giving these instructions, Chu Xiu didn't waste any time, and directly prepared to go into closed-door cultivation. Right now, Chu Xiu's realm was very strange. Strictly speaking, his foundation in power was very deep, so when he stepped into the profound understanding of heaven and earth realm, he directly skipped the early stage of adapting to power and reached the middle and late stage. However, realm wasn't the same as battle power. His battle power far surpassed his realm. Apart from a half-step martial immortal like Xian Jialua, he didn't have absolute confidence in defeating him. He even dared to fight a peak profound understanding of heaven and earth realm existence like Ming Xuanyu. Therefore, the current Chu Xiu was already qualified to reach out and touch that legendary martial immortal realm. As Chu Xiu formed hand seals, the power of his primordial spirit rapidly depleted. At the same time, in the High Heaven sect, the sect master of the High Heaven sect, Fang Yinglong, who was in seclusion, suddenly opened his eyes. He seemed to feel a trace of the power of his spirit trembling, but when he carefully examined it, it disappeared. Shaking his head, Fang Yinglong closed his eyes and continued to cultivate. With so many cultivators in the High Heaven sect, it was possible that someone was cultivating a secret technique related to the spirit, so it was normal for there to be some movement. At this moment, in the depths of the spirit cloud realm, Tianhun, who was tied to the bronze pillar, suddenly raised his head and revealed an indescribable smile. The power of his spirit began to move, and runes began to shine. In the misty space, Tianhun looked at Chu Xiao and said with a smile, I didn't expect you to contact me so quickly. Did you encounter something troublesome? Or did you encounter a problem in your cultivation? Chu Xiao said in a deep voice, It's a matter of cultivation. I want to know what the martial immortal realm is, and how to reach it. In fact, Chu Xiao knew about the martial immortal realm. After all, there were many martial immortals lectures on the streets, and many of them were descriptions of the martial immortal realm. But it could also be said that Chu Xiao did not know. The things that were said in the lectures of the martial immortals, each person had a different appearance, and each person had a different understanding. Chu Xiao wanted to know what the true way to the martial immortal realm was. Tianhun pondered for a moment and said, With your current realm, it's a bit too early to think about the martial immortal realm. But it's okay. You will step into this realm sooner or later. With your speed, it's fast. On the path of martial Tao, from tempering one's muscles and bones to comprehending the heavens and earth, from cultivating oneself to comprehending the world, there is actually no escape from the cage of this world. The heavens and earth will evolve into a domain. Within this domain you are God. You are an existence that can share the same origin as the world. However, you can understand martial immortals like this. Martial immortals are existences that wish to transcend the world. The laws of the world say that snow cannot fall in summer, but martial immortals can make snow fall in June. They are not simply using their own power to control the weather, but to directly change the laws of this world. In simpler terms, they are using their own power to change the laws, distort the world. Tianhun said in a deep voice, The word martial immortal is very vivid. Of course, when you are still in the cage of this world, even if you reach the heavens and earth profound understanding, you are still a human. However, when you attempt to transcend the world that you exist in, your level has already surpassed the category of human and become an immortal. In the 9 heavens of the path of martial Tao, every step is actually treading on the sky. When you reach the highest point and trample the entire sky beneath your feet, that is the true transcendence. Chapter 1202. It was the same thing, but everyone looked at it differently. A world in a flower. A world in a person's eyes. Perhaps it was because Chu Xiao was the earth soul of Dugu Weiwei. Even though he had lost all of his memories, Chu Xiao felt that the things that Tianhun told him were very similar to him. After a moment of silence, Chu Xiao suddenly asked, Since martial immortals walk in the sky, and it has nothing to do with the power they cultivate, why are there so many martial immortals in the upper realm? Tianhun chuckled. Who said it has nothing to do with the power they cultivate? If you want to walk in the sky, you must first understand the sky. If you cannot stand shoulder to shoulder with the sky, how can you walk in the sky? The Daoyu ocean world's essence energy is more abundant, and martial cultivators are closer to the upper realm. As such, the chances of martial immortals being born here are higher than in the lower realm. Of course, it's not absolute. For example, Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji. Over the past 10,000 years in the lower realm, there have been martial immortals in every generation. Surmounting the 9th layer of the martial immortal realm will allow one to transcend and become undying. Has anyone in this world reached the transcendent realm? Tianhun shook his head and said, I don't know. At least, Dugu Weiwei did not know 500 years ago. But now, he knows that by gathering 3 source energies and entering the longevity heaven, he will be able to reach the transcendent realm. Right now, you and I are the stepping stones on his path to the transcendent realm. Do you want to reach the peak, or do you want to be a stepping stone? You must consider it carefully. If you don't hurry up, I'm afraid we can only be a stepping stone to help him transcend this world. As Tianhun finished his last sentence, the power of Chu Xiao's primordial spirit was slightly exhausted. Tianhuan's figure disappeared before Chu Xiao's eyes. Chu Xiao let out a long sigh. His gaze became much more determined, and he continued his seclusion. Chunqing Di had no path ahead of him, so he had to open up a path himself in order to reach the peak. However, Chu Xiao was different. He had many paths ahead of him, but what he lacked the most was time. He had reached the apex of the lower realm. Even in the celestial Daoyuo, he could be considered to be a character. However, even with that being the case, Chu Xiao was even more anxious than when he was in the lower realm. In fact, he was so focused on his cultivation that he even forgot to eat and sleep. Mei Qinglian and the others were stunned by that. They thought that Chu Xiu had been provoked by what happened with Xian Jialuo and was preparing to go against the martial immortal. However, in Chu Xiu, Xian Jialuo, and the Sanskrit was, and the sect and the Sanskrit. He was his only enemy. He had only. In Chu Xiu was. In Chu Xiu. During the period of Chu Xiu's crazy cultivation, the power of Chu Xiu's subordinates also began to grow wildly. Groups of warriors from the Kunlun devil cult took turns to enter the Daoyuotian world to cultivate. After cultivating, they did not stay idle in the lower realm. The Kunlun devil cult had now controlled the northern Yan and the south. All kinds of resources in the south had been occupied by the Kunlun devil cult. As for the northern Yan, Mei Qinglian had sent a group of people to help the northern Yan suppress the martial arts sections. At the same time, they were also mining and excavating the extreme north. Although these places were bitter cold, it did not mean that they were not rich in resources. Otherwise, the Great Guangming Temple would not have established a sect here. All kinds of mineral resources were mined, and almost all of them were transported to the Daoyuotian world for Master Yuanji and Chaoing to build a formation. It was as if they wanted to build the stronghold in the south as the headquarters of the devil cult. It was even more solemn than the lower realm. After all, no one in the lower realm dared to touch the whiskers of the Kunlun devil cult at this time. 4 months later, on a small road at the junction of Kangwu County and Lingluo County, Lu Jiang he was sitting in a pavilion board. He was holding a jar of wine and waiting there, taking a sip from time to time. The entire Kunlun devil cult was very busy. Those who had the strength were busy cultivating in seclusion. Those who had the ability were busy arranging the construction of the stronghold, the formation, and so on. Lu Jiang he belonged to the category of those who had the strength, but he was not willing to cultivate, so he wandered around the entire Kangwu County. In the end, Mei Qinglian could not stand it anymore, and let him be responsible for guarding the caravans of Kangwu County. The caravans of Kangwu County not only went to and fro the south, but also to other places. Among them, many caravans had to pass through Lingluo County. Lingluo County was now the territory of Cold River City, so they naturally had to be careful of the tricks of the people of Cold River City. Therefore, Mei Qinglian let Lu Jiang he come over to guard the caravans. Of course, this kind of thing was also very boring in Lu Jiang he's opinion. He could not wait for Cold River City to cause some trouble, so that he could exercise his muscles and bones. It was a pity that although Cold River City sometimes did not abide by the rules, they did not intend to take action against the Emperor Sky Pavilion officially. They were too lazy to do these small tricks that could not be taken into public. At this time, Lu Jianghe, who looked leisurely, did not notice that a few miles away from him, in a tall building at the border of Lingluo County, someone was staring at him. The person who crippled you in Lingxiao City last time is this person. He is the one who possesses that magical and evil blood refining secret method? The person who spoke was an old man wearing a blood-red robe. He had a sinister appearance and his eyes were blood-red, making him look extremely evil. His blood-red robe was even more bizarre. It was not purely blood-red, but as if there was a layer of blood flowing on it, as if it was alive. It was extremely bizarre. The old man was the leader of the Church of Blood River, Ancestor Blood River. Very few people remembered his real name. In any case, when he became famous in the eastern region, he was called Ancestor Blood River. In the eastern region, other than the martial immortal experts, the person with the greatest power was this person. The person standing beside him was Yin Shueli, who was almost sucked dry of all his blood and cultivation by Lu Jianghe in the martial arts gambling fight. Previously, although Lu Jianghe did not kill him, he still sucked dry all of Yin Shueli's blood and qi. To a cultivator like Yin Shueli who specialized in the power of blood and qi, it was almost equivalent to his cultivation being crippled. More than half a year had passed, but Yin Shueli had yet to return to his peak. He was still like a mummy. Although he still had the cultivation of the mysterious heaven and earth realm, if they were to really fight, he probably could not even defeat a cultivator of the true fire realm. It's this person. Staring at Lu Jianghe in the distance, Yin Shuili's eyes revealed a tinge of resentment. Ever since he was crippled by Lu Jianghe, his position in the Church of Blood River had plummeted. Even his juniors did not care about him. Even his master faintly felt that he was not important. However, it was fortunate that he brought a piece of news that allowed his master to not completely give up on him. That news was Lu Jianghe's cultivation technique. The cultivation technique passed down by ancestor Blood River was already very powerful in the path of blood and qi. At least, that was what Yin Shuili thought. However, compared to Lu Jianghe, the cultivation technique of the Church of Blood River was really not presentable. The level of Lu Jianghe's cultivation technique was definitely one level higher than the cultivation technique of the Church of Blood River. Furthermore, if it wasn't for the fact that his cultivation technique countered Lu Jianghe, he wouldn't have lost so miserably the last time. He wouldn't have been crushed by Lu Jianghe. Therefore, he immediately told this news to Ancestor Blood River, and encouraged him to attack Lu Jianghe and force him to reveal the cultivation technique. However, although Ancestor Blood River was tempted, Lu Jianghe did not leave the Tsangnan residence after that period of time. This left Ancestor Blood River with no other choice. Although he was a figure in the Eastern Region martial arts circle, and stood on the side of Cold River City, he was not arrogant enough to attack the prefectural governor's residence before the war between Cold River City and the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Although his strength was the same as Xian Jialuo's, there was no Sanskrit behind him. It was only recently when Lu Jianghe came out to escort the caravan that he found an opportunity. Ancestor Blood River turned his gaze to Yin Shuili and said in a hoarse voice, "Are you sure that this person's cultivation technique is really so powerful that it far surpasses the level of the Church of Blood River? You have to know that he is Chu Xiu's man after all, and Chu Xiu is the prefectural governor of Kangwu County. If we touch his man in Kangwu County, it is equivalent to provoking the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Do you understand the implications of this?" Ancestor Blood River's eyes flickered with a cold light that penetrated into Yin Shuili's heart, causing him to tremble. He had stayed in the Church of Blood River for a long time, and knew what kind of person Ancestor Blood River was. Although he was the eldest disciple of Ancestor Blood River, and was the strongest, he was the most doted on previously. However, now that he was crippled, he was basically useless to the Church of Blood River, or rather, to Ancestor Blood River. At this moment, as long as he showed the slightest mistake, he had no doubt that his master would take away the last bit of blood essence from him. Yin Shuili clenched his teeth and said, "Master, I dare to use my life to guarantee that the cultivation technique on Lu Jianghe is definitely from the same source as the Church of Blood River. Furthermore, it is more powerful and mystical. As long as we can obtain that cultivation technique, the overall strength of the Church of Blood River will definitely skyrocket. Even if we offend the entire Imperial Sky Pavilion, it will be worth it." Upon hearing Yin Shuili's words, Ancestor Blood River snorted coldly and headed straight for Lu Jianghe. At this moment, Lu Jianghe was still drinking leisurely. However, the next moment, he immediately threw the wine jar aside and looked in a certain direction with a solemn expression. 500 years ago, he had followed Dugu Weiwei into battle. 500 years later, he had followed Chu Xiu and experienced many battles. He was extremely sensitive to killing intent. Someone was going to attack him. The next moment, two blood-colored figures landed. Ancestor Blood River was slightly surprised and said, "Your senses are quite sharp." The moment Lu Jianghe saw Yin Shuili, he knew that Yin Shuili was here to cause trouble. After taking another look at Ancestor Blood River, Lu Jianghe sneered and said, "What's the matter? After beating up the young one, the old one came? You can't beat me in the arena competition, so you brought an old man to cause trouble for me. Aren't you ashamed?" Chapter 1203. Lu Jianghe was someone who had seen much of the world. To be precise, he had once followed Dugu Weiwei to slaughter the entire righteous Jianghu. Of course, he would not be afraid of trash like Ancestor Blood River, who called him an old bastard in front of him. Ancestor Blood River's eyes revealed a touch of coldness as he said, "I hate people with foul mouths. Today I'll give you a chance. Hand over your cultivation method, and I'll let you die a quick death." Lu Jianghe's eyes revealed a touch of understanding. It turned out that this old bastard was after his cultivation method. With a sneer, Lu Jianghe directly scolded. A bunch of good-for-nothings from your blood river cult. Are you worthy of coveting my cultivation method? Are you worthy? You've cultivated for hundreds of years, yet you can't even understand the cultivation method. You've made a good power of qi and blood into a blood-sucking monster. Every one of you has cultivated until you're neither human nor ghost. What a joke. So what if you're a half-step martial immortal? Now you've come to snatch the cultivation method of a true fire spirit refinement realm warrior. Aren't you afraid of embarrassing your master? Oh, I forgot. I heard that you're the ancestor of the Blood River cult, right? The ancestor is a shameless old bastard. One can imagine what kind of trash the people below him are. A bunch of even more shameless trash. Why do you still want to cultivate martial arts when you're like this? You might as well drown yourself in a puddle of urine, lest others laugh at you. Before Lu Jianghe joined the Kunlun Devil cult, he was a pirate. He was a standard lowlife, and his mouth was very venomous. Ancestor Blood River and Yin Shueli were so angry that they were breathing heavily. Their eyes revealed a ferocious killing intent. Boy, you're very good. After I dig out the cultivation method in your head bit by bit, I'll break your limbs and throw you into the blood prison. Before Ancestor Blood River could finish speaking, an extremely powerful force emerged from Lu Jianghe's body. In an instant, a blood-red light soared into the sky. Lu Jianghe's figure turned into a waterfall and fled towards Cangnan residence. At that moment, Lu Jianghe directly used the blood demon transformation technique to escape. After watching Chu Xiu use the blood demon transformation technique so many times, it was finally his turn. However, most of the time, Chu Xiu used this move to fight with his life on the line, while the first time Lu Jianghe used it, it was to escape. It wasn't that he was a coward. Rather, if he were to rush forward and risk his life against a half-step martial immortal, he would simply be an idiot. Although he had been sealed for 500 years, he still had many years that he had yet to enjoy. He did not wish to die here. Behind him, Ancestor Blood River and Yin Shueli both had dumbfounded expressions. Just now, Lu Jianghe had cursed them in front of their faces. He appeared to be incomparably unyielding, as if he was going to fight them to the end. None of them had expected him to escape just like that. It was so straightforward. However, that made Ancestor Blood River feel a sense of humiliation, as if he had been toyed with. You're looking to die. Ancestor Blood River roared furiously and chased after Lu Jianghe. Yin Shueli also followed behind. However, his strength was already half crippled and he could not catch up to the two of them. After all, Ancestor Blood River was in existence in the half-step martial immortal realm. Although his cultivation method was not as profound as the blood demon divine technique, his speed was still very fast when he used the simplest blood escape technique. Seeing Ancestor Blood River right behind him, Lu Jianghe cursed his bad luck in his heart. Back then, when he used the blood demon divine technique in front of everyone, Lu Jianghe did not think so much. In his opinion, he had only crippled Yin Shueli. In the future, if the Blood Demon Church came looking for trouble, they might find the Royal Sky Pavilion or Chu Xiu. However, they would not find him. He had never expected that a large Daoyuotian faction, although not the top-notch one, still had a half-step martial immortal, could be so poor that they even coveted his cultivation method. You run quite fast. However, no matter how fast you are, you will not be able to escape from my palm. Ancestor Blood River's blood escape technique exploded with extreme power. The boundless river of blood behind him flowed and enveloped Lu Jianghe. Lu Jianghe had already reached the half-step profound understanding of heaven and earth. At that moment, when he used the blood demon transformation technique, his power was even stronger than most profound understanding of heaven and earth existences. An endless mist of blood enveloped his body. However, the next moment, it turned into an extremely sharp blade and slashed the river of blood apart. Then he continued to escape. Ancestor Blood River exclaimed in surprise. The river of blood that had just been torn apart healed rapidly and turned into countless tiny blood threads that hung behind Lu Jianghe. The tiny blood threads trembled. On one hand, they caused the surrounding essence of the heaven and earth to stagnate. On the other hand, they pulled at the blood in Lu Jianghe's body as if they wanted to pull all the blood out of his body. Lu Jianghe humped coldly and formed hand seals. In an instant, Ancestor Blood River discovered in shock that the blood threads did not seem to be under his control. They all shattered and dissipated. Ancestor Blood River was not angry. Instead, he revealed an ecstatic expression. He did not have such a method to control his vital energy and blood. The thoroughly meticulous method was an extreme study of vital energy and blood. Ancestor Blood River had started from scratch. He was not from one of the top sections. He had only established the Blood River cult by relying on the remnants of the Blood River sect, an extinct ancient sect, as a foundation. The flaws in his cultivation method were too great. He had been a half-step martial immortal for a long time, but he had not broken through. This was not because of his strength, but because his martial path was not comprehensive enough. If he could seize this guy's cultivation method and integrate it into his own martial path, he might be able to reach a higher level and get a glimpse of the supreme realm of martial immortal. With that thought in mind, Ancestor Blood River laughed wildly. With a wave of his hand, a large amount of vital energy and blood stirred up the essence of the heaven and earth. It smashed wildly towards Lu Jianghe, causing him to vomit blood. Although the Blood Demon Divine technique was clearly a level higher than Ancestor Blood River's cultivation method, and could dissolve the opponent's vital energy and blood, the difference in strength between the two was too great. Even if he did not use the cultivation method related to vital energy and blood, Lu Jianghe was no match for him. The two sides chased each other all the way to the outside of Tsungnan Mansion. At this time, even Ancestor Blood River was a little anxious. He had also underestimated Lu Jianghe. His opponent's tenacity was simply beyond his imagination. Every time he thought that Lu Jianghe could not hold on any longer, he did not expect that Lu Jianghe would still be able to burst out with strength and continue to escape. Seeing that Lu Jianghe had escaped to the outside of Tsungnan Mansion, Ancestor Blood River also knew that there were several heaven and earth mysterious realm experts guarding Tsungnan Mansion. He did not have many chances. Ancestor Blood River snorted coldly. His vital energy and blood suddenly burst out and condensed into a blood arrow. Lu Jianghe still wanted to use the Blood Demon Divine technique to break down the blood arrow, but the blood arrow seemed to pass through space, directly passing through the void. The next moment, it had directly pierced through Lu Jianghe's heart. At that moment, blood splattered out, but Lu Jianghe forced himself to make a seal with his hands, and the blood that spilled out was taken back into his body. His speed actually increased by another level, and his figure instantly leaped into Tsungnan Mansion. Ancestor Blood River's face was gloomy. He did not expect that Lu Jianghe's tenacity would be so strong. To be precise, Lu Jianghe had studied the path of vital energy and blood to the extreme. Vital energy and blood were vitality, so he could burst out with such tenacity. But the more it was like this, the more he desired Lu Jianghe's Blood Demon Divine technique. But this time, he had let Lu Jianghe escape, and he had no chance. Ancestor Blood River could only leave unwillingly. At this time, in Tsungnan Mansion, most of the people were in seclusion, and Mei Qinglian was still taking care of some chores. Suddenly, she felt a chaotic power with the smell of blood rushing in. Mei Qinglian immediately put down the things at hand and went out to check. As a result, she saw Lu Jianghe standing miserably at the gate. His breath was extremely low, and he was covered in blood. There was also a bloody hole in his chest. Seeing Mei Qinglian, Lu Jianghe grinned and said weakly, "F***ck. I've suffered a big loss this time." As soon as his voice fell, Lu Jianghe lost consciousness and fell to the ground with a thud. His last thought was that no matter how strong a woman's cultivation was, she was not reliable. Why did Mei Qinglian's first reaction was to cover her mouth and cry out in alarm instead of helping him up, causing him to fall again? In the secret chamber of the prefectural governor's mansion, Feng Buping had been fiddling with Lu Jianghe's body for a long time. Chu Xiu and the others had already woken up from their seclusion. They looked at Lu Jianghe lying in the middle with a solemn expression. Seeing Lu Jianghe's miserable appearance just now, Chu Xiu was very angry, and so were the others. Although Lu Jianghe had a bad mouth and an unreliable character, it was undeniable that he had helped Chu Xiu a lot in the early days of Chu Xiu's cultivation. He was definitely Chu Xiu's most trusted confidant. Touching one of Chu Xiu's people was equivalent to slapping Chu Xiu's face. No matter who it was, they had to pay the price. After a long time, Feng Buping stood up and said, "My lord, Hall Master Lu is fine. Although his injuries are serious and anyone else would have died, Hall Master Lu's blood devil art is extremely magical. All of his vitality is dispersed into every drop of blood. So let alone a heart exploding, even if his head is cut off, he won't die as long as his true soul is not destroyed. However, he lost too much blood this time. I'm afraid it will take a long time for him to recover." "Then why hasn't he woken up yet?" Feng Buping thought for a moment and said, "Because the loss of blood is too serious. Hall Master Lu hid his true soul in his blood to protect it. This is a subconscious reaction to cultivating the blood devil art. After all, although the body is not important, the true soul is the most important. Now we can either wait for a period of time until his body slowly recovers and his true soul feels that there is no danger. Then it will naturally return. Or we can stimulate him and let his true soul awaken in advance." Chu Xiu nodded and said to Lu Jianghe loudly, "I hereby bestow Lu Jianghe the 5th demon sovereign of our holy church. He will be titled Blood Sea Demon Sovereign." Lu Jianghe, who was lying on the bed, did not have the slightest reaction. Chu Xiu frowned. "It doesn't work?" At this time Mei Qinglian suddenly said softly, "Red Lotus Demon Sovereign is looking for you." Lu Jianghe, who was lying on the bed, suddenly twitched. He sat up like a carp and looked around. "Where is Red Lotus?" When he saw the surrounding crowd, Lu Jianghe finally realized where he was. He let out a long sigh and said in a resentful tone, "Next time, wake me up in a different way. Don't use Red Lotus Demon Sovereign as a joke." Chapter 1204. Although Lu Jianghe's injuries seemed to be very serious, and even his heart was shattered, everyone knew that he was fine when they saw that he was still in the mood to talk nonsense. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Who was the one who chased you? What trouble did you cause outside?" When Lu Jianghe heard this, he immediately began to complain. "What does this have to do with me? It's because you asked me to cripple Yin Shueli in the Lingxiao City Martial Arts Exhibition. In the end, his master came looking for me and wanted to snatch my blood demon divine technique. That old bastard called Blood River Patriarch has the strength of a half-step martial immortal. How could I defeat him? It's already extraordinary that I was able to escape from him." In fact, Lu Jianghe was being modest. He was not good at other things, but his ability to escape was definitely stronger than his combat power. With that mouth of his, he had already offended quite a number of people before he joined the Kunlun Demon Sect. After he joined the Kunlun Demon Sect, there were countless experts of the righteous path who wanted to tear that mouth of his. The reason he could survive until now, other than the power of the Kunlun devil cult, it was also related to his ability to escape. A cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. "Blood River Patriarch, you're courting death?" Mei Qinglian asked. "What do you plan to do this time?" Chu Xiu said coldly, "You have to look at the master before you beat the dog. Old Lu is injured to this extent. Can we still sit back and do nothing? I can't afford to offend the Cold River City, but can I not afford to offend the Blood River Cult? Since they are called the Blood River Cult, I will really make their blood flow like a river." Actually, during this period of time, Chu Xiu had been a bit sullen. He had destroyed the North and South Buddhist sects in the lower realm, and shocked the pugilistic world with his demonic might. But what about in the Daoyu Ocean? First, he was threatened by the old guy Yi Weikong from the Cold River City. He relied on Wei Shiya's control of the rootless sacred fire to scare him. Later, Xian Jialua came to his door and joined forces with the Bliss Demon Palace to besiege his stronghold in the south. He still had to rely on Qinqing Di to help him out. When had he, Chu Xiu, ever been so passive and aggrieved? In addition, Chu Xiu knew his identity and knew that he was the greatest threat. Who knew when he would be swallowed by that legendary existence as a stepping stone? Although Chu Xiu had always been able to maintain an extremely calm and peaceful state of mind, when all these things were added together, Chu Xiu couldn't help but feel like he was about to explode. Chu Xiu did not know what others would do after their mental state exploded, but after Chu Xiu's mental state exploded, he only thought of one thing, and that was to kill. No one knew how the Blood River sect would feel when they bumped into Chu Xiu in such a state. At this time, Lu Jianghe felt that something was wrong. To be honest, when he woke up from his serious injuries, Chu Xiu and the others surrounded him with concern. This made him very touched. At least 500 years ago, he had not received such treatment. After all, with his mouth, even in the Kunlun devil cult, there were many people who annoyed him. Seeing that Chu Xiu was angry and wanted to help him take revenge, Lu Jianghe was also very touched. But the problem is, even though I'm touched, can't you use the right words? What did it mean to hit a dog? Why did these words sound so awkward to him? Lu Jianghe coughed and said, that. Before he finished speaking, he saw Chu Xiu waving his hand. Elder Wei, please take care of Kangwu County. City Lord Shang, and the others will follow me to Blood River Patriarch. Also tell Tangye Yin Bugue, and the other elites of the holy cult who know about the Daluotian incident to gather. This time, I will really make Blood River Patriarch bleed. Seeing that Chu Xiu rarely looked so serious, everyone present said in a low voice, yes. Chu Xiu's prestige could be said to be on full display at this moment. If it were Su Fengshan and the others, they would definitely advise Chu Xiu to calm down. After all, the Blood River sect was backed by Cold River City. Moreover, they were not within the Imperial Sky Pavilion sphere of influence. If they acted rashly, there would definitely be repercussions. But if it were Mei Qinglian and the others, they would only follow every word Chu Xiu said, because they believed in Chu Xiu. No matter how crazy Chu Xiu's plan was, he would leave a way out for himself. Chu Xiu patted Lu Jianghe's shoulder and said, Old Lu, you should rest here first. Didn't Patriarch Blood River almost use up all the blood in your body? Wait here. Wait for me to suck out all the blood in that old thing's body. Then make it up to you and help you take revenge. Although Lu Jianghe was very touched, he still struggled to get up and said, Let's talk about dogs and their owners. Before he could finish his words, Chu Xiu waved his hand and brought his men away. At the same time, he instructed Feng Buping. Divine Dr. Feng, old Lu's vitality has yet to recover. I'll have to trouble you to take care of him during this period of time. After saying that, Chu Xiu directly left the secret room with his people. Lu Jianghe's hand was stretched in the air, and he suddenly felt helpless. Feng Buping at the side. Sect leader is really good to his dog. Oh no, to his people. Our holy sect is really blessed to have such a leader. Lu Jianghe glared at Feng Buping and said angrily, Get out. I want to rest. Although Feng Buping's strength was far from Lu Jianghe's, he did not fear Lu Jianghe at all. Hearing this, he curled his lips and said, What are you being arrogant for? If you are beaten up like this again, won't you still have to rely on me? In the Kunlun devil cult, Feng Buping was an extremely special talent. He could cure diseases and refine pills. The entire Kunlun devil cult's alchemy system could be said to be single-handedly managed by Feng Buping. Therefore, although he was not conspicuous, he was extremely important in the Kunlun devil cult. If Master Yuanji was able to mix with a position by Chu Xiu's side because of his obedience and a part of his strength, then Feng Buping relied on 90% of his strength. As for Lu Jianghe, he was really not afraid. Looking at Feng Buping walking out with a look of contempt, Lu Jianghe couldn't help but feel depressed. The elites under Chu Xiu who knew the secrets of the Daluotian had been trained since he was still in the Guanzhong torture room. There were not many of them, only a few hundred people. Some of them were martial artists from the Guanzhong torture room, and some were martial artists from the Yinma lineage, Blue Dragon Society, and Jimu Hall. Anyway, these people came from a variety of backgrounds, but they could be said to have experienced hundreds of battles. They had even experienced the war between the righteous and demonic factions, more than once or twice. Now, after being purified by the Daluotian aura for such a long time, the weakest had reached the realm of unity of man and nature, which was very amazing. At the same time, their efficiency was also extremely fast. When Chu Xiu asked them to gather, they almost used the fastest speed to arrive at the Tsungnan mansion from the stronghold of the southern barbaric land. Chu Xiu made such a big movement and took away so many people. Su Fengshan and others also noticed it. Although they didn't want to ask, Su Fengshan had to bite the bullet and ask, Sir, you are? Before Su Fengshan finished speaking, he was interrupted by Chu Xiu. I'm going to kill people. You stay here and guard the county governor's mansion. After saying that, a group of people directly left the city with a frightening murderous aura. Su Fengshan was dumbfounded, but he didn't dare to say a word. He returned to the county governor's mansion dejectedly. The more he came into contact with this sir, the more he couldn't see through him, and he didn't dare to ask more. The experience of scheming against others in the Imperial Sky Pavilion for many years told him that in the face of Chu Xiu, it was enough as long as he was obedient. The Blood River Church wasn't within the territory of the Imperial Sky Pavilion or other big sects, but in the middle of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, Cold River City, and High Heaven Sect. The eastern region was so big that it was impossible for these big sects to control all the areas. Although the areas they controlled were treasures with the most abundant spiritual energy, for a sect like the Blood River Church, when choosing a sect, they would try their best to avoid the areas controlled by the big sections. In fact, the position of a sect like the Blood River Church was very awkward. If you said they were weak, the Blood River Church had one half-step martial immortal, and 2 or 3 people in the profound understanding of heaven and earth realm. That kind of strength already surpassed 99% of the sections. In the entire eastern region, they could be counted as the best. But if you said they were strong, a sect without a martial immortal to oversee it wasn't too strong. Therefore, a sect like the Blood River Church had always had only 2 paths to take. One was to pass it down from generation to generation. Half-step martial immortal was not something that could be reached in every generation. If one generation failed to reach it, the sect would naturally decline. The other was to advance against the trend like the Cold River City, and forcibly dig out a piece of meat from the mouths of the top big sections. Of course, this step could be said to be extremely difficult. Chu Xiu raised his head and looked at the blood-red mountain in front of him. His eyes flickered with ferocious killing intent. The blood-red mountain in front of him was the location of the Blood River Church. In fact, the mountain used to be an ordinary mountain. It was only because the world energy in this area was relatively dense that the Blood River Church turned it into a mountain. But perhaps Ancestor Blood River wanted to show off his strength, so he had people dye the mountain red. Moreover, he told others that when the Blood River Church fought for the mountain, the blood that flowed after the fierce battle had dyed the mountain red. In reality, when the Blood River Church occupied this place, there wasn't even a single person in this broken place who would fight with them. After a while, Chu Xiu waved his hand and said faintly, "Kill." In front of the mountain gate of the Blood River Church, 2 real Pellet State disciples were guarding the mountain gate in boredom. In fact, it was enough to send a few young disciples to guard the mountain gate, but Ancestor Blood River wanted to save face, so he insisted that these real Pellet State deputies take turns to guard the mountain gate. This had already made them a little resentful. At this time, the 2 suddenly saw hundreds of people coming with murderous intent. Their complexions suddenly changed, and they immediately shouted, "Who are you? Stop." Chu Xiu stopped and glanced at the 2. Just when the 2 of them were waiting for Chu Xiu to report his name, they were shocked to find that the blood in their whole body seemed to be out of control, and it was boiling crazily in their bodies. Before they could react, a poochie sound rang out, and the blood in their bodies was instantly sucked out, splattering all over the ground. Their corpses were twisted and shriveled like zombies. Chapter 1205. Chu Xiu was here to kill. There was no need to talk too much when it came to killing. Lu Fengxian and Mei Qinglian looked at each other, feeling slightly surprised. They were people who knew Chu Xiu better. Naturally, they knew that there was something wrong with Chu Xiu's current state. His murderous aura was too strong. Although Lu Jianghe was seriously injured, it was not that they looked down on Lu Jianghe. Lu Jianghe's position in Chu Xiu's heart was not that important. At least, it was not important enough to affect Chu Xiu's emotions. It seemed that Chu Xiu had been under too much pressure recently. It was so heavy that he needed a place to vent it. Looking up at the peak of the mountain, Chu Xiu said lightly, "Go up and destroy the sect." In an instant, a powerful murderous aura shot up into the sky. The entire Blood River sect was suddenly covered in dark clouds, shrouded in a powerful murderous aura. The martial artists of the Blood River sect were not blind or deaf when Chu Xiu caused such a commotion. Of course, they could feel it. Before Chu Xiu and the others reached the halfway point of the mountain, The entire Blood River sect's formation had been activated. Sect leader Shang, it's up to you now. Shang Tianliang nodded, and the withering field bloomed around him. When he walked in front of the formation, the mountain guarding formation of the Blood River sect began to operate crazily and overload. It glowed red, and its power was displayed to the extreme. The power of withering was unique to Shang Tianliang. It was related to time and the transformation of yin and yang. The 4 seasons withered and flourished. Everything could only function normally within a certain pattern. Now, although Shang Tianliang had made the mountain-protecting formation of Blood River cult erupt with its greatest power, in less than 10 breaths, the entire formation had already produced a series of cracking sounds. Clearly, it could no longer withstand the great burden and directly shattered. How dare you? Groups of martial artists rushed down from the peak of the mountain. The leader was a middle-aged man in the heaven and earth mystic realm. This person was called Duan Lingkong, and he was the vice-sect leader of the Blood River sect. In fact, he was not a disciple of Patriarch Blood River. Instead, he had joined the Blood River cult halfway, but he had learned Patriarch Blood River's cultivation method. However, because he was already a famous figure in the Jianghu, an expert at the peak of heaven and earth elemental enlightenment, he had a status, so he didn't have a master. In addition, with the temptation of the position of vice-sect leader, he brought some of his disciples and joined Patriarch Blood River in exchange for the position of vice-sect leader. Who are you? How dare you barge into my Blood River cult and kill my people? Are you looking to die? When Chu Xiu was making a name for himself in the eastern region, Duan Lingkong spent most of his time in closed-door cultivation, so even though he'd heard of Chu Xiu's name, he didn't know Chu Xiu. However, what Chu Xiu replied to him was an extremely sharp and powerful saber light that seemed capable of tearing the entire mountain apart. The saber intent was so powerful that it seemed capable of tearing heaven and earth apart, and it was so sharp that it could cut through any force. The blood glow around Duan Lingkong's body surged, and a 300-foot-long blood river appeared, blocking in front of Chu Xiu. Although the Blood River cult's cultivation method was not as powerful as the Blood Demon Divine technique, for a powerhouse like Duan Lingkong who had cultivated to the heaven and earth mystic illumination stage, he had already absorbed a lot of qi and blood into his body. At this moment, the power of the Blood River was extraordinary. However, in the next moment, Chu Xiu's sharp saber that combined the saber intent of the shattering formula and the ethereal slash completely tore Duan Lingkong's Blood River apart. As if it had not encountered any obstruction at all, the saber aura slashed directly at him. In shock, the boundless qi and blood in Duan Lingkong's hand condensed into a blood-refined saber. The qi and blood on it was so dense that it was black, and it even faintly revealed a trace of powerful devil qi. This blood-refined saber collided with Chu Xiu's saber. With a loud bang, blood splattered in all directions. Duan Lingkong could not withstand the powerful force and was blasted away. He could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. A hint of horror appeared in his eyes. What kind of monster is this? The foundation of his strength is simply terrifying. However, in the next moment, he made a seal with his hand despite his injuries. The blood that had shattered into a pile of blood mist under Chu Xiu's saber suddenly condensed into threads and condensed under Chu Xiu's feet. It enveloped his entire body like a huge blood cocoon. At the same time, Duan Lingkong sneered and began to exert force, wanting to suck all the blood in Chu Xiu's body dry. However, his smile froze on his face because he sensed that there was no movement of qi and blood in the blood cocoon at all. The blood cocoon dispersed, but there was no one in it. Illusion. Duan Lingkong was horrified. In the next moment, 8 figures of Chu Xiu actually appeared around him. At the same time, they held devil qi longbows in their hands, and 8 triple annihilation arrows that were burning with pitch-black annihilation fire burst out explosively. The bloody light in Duan Lingkong's eyes skyrocketed, and the energy of his primordial spirit was raised to the limit. However, he could not see which one was real and which one was fake. He had never seen such an evil and terrifying illusion in his life. Suddenly, Duan Lingkong clenched his teeth and opened up a blood-red territory. He wanted to use the territory to forcefully resist the triple annihilation arrows and test the authenticity of the arrows. However, when all 8 arrows entered his territory, Duan Lingkong's expression changed abruptly. It's real. All 8 arrows are real. 8 extremely powerful arrows that were burning with annihilation fire are all real. Duan Lingkong did not dare to believe it. How could his opponent's strength be so powerful? At this critical moment, he could only set up the blood river around him and retract his territory to forcefully defend himself. The 8 arrows had already locked on all the places around him that he could dodge to. It was impossible for him to escape. With a loud bang, Duan Lingkong spat out a mouthful of blood again. The pitch-black annihilation fire wrapped around him and evaporated his 300 feet long blood river. However, before he could think of a way to eliminate the troublesome annihilation fire, Chu Xiu slashed the ground with his saber. In an instant, the ground trembled and a huge wave of saber light rose from the ground, directly enveloping Duan Lingkong. 7 limits, annihilation. The blood river was extinguished and fresh blood splattered everywhere. At this moment, Duan Lingkong's body was covered in blood, and his eyes were filled with horror. He was beaten up in all aspects. In front of this person, he did not even have the slightest chance to fight back. He was directly hung up and beaten up to this state. At this moment, Duan Lingkong no longer had the slightest intention to fight. The blood qi around his body exploded, and he wanted to escape to the mountain. However, at this moment, a whisper that sounded like a ghost whispering entered his ears. The sky was crying, and the blood rain was falling, but he could not absorb any energy from the blood rain. He could only feel an endless chill enveloping him. The void was torn apart, and a gigantic devil's hand fell directly on him, grabbing him in its hand. Scram! Duan Lingkong roared, and the blood qi around his body burned intensely. Only then did he finally break free from the gigantic hand that was formed by the mantra of great compassion. However, in the next moment, a figure had already appeared in front of him. A saber slashed down, and the saber's intent was sharp, tearing everything apart. The blood qi around his body was slashed apart. At this critical moment, he directly grabbed the saber with both his hands, and his blood qi burned madly. However, both of his arms were still torn apart, and his body was slashed to the ground, creating a huge pit. Duan Lingkong struggled to climb out of the pit, but in the next moment, Chu Xiu's hand was already on his neck, and his entire body was lifted up. Duan Lingkong was shocked to find that the blood qi that he could control at will in the past did not listen to his orders at all. Instead, under Chu Xiu's control, it was constantly boiling and concentrated in his head. Duan Lingkong's face was flushed, and he shouted in horror, "Spare me!" Before he could finish speaking, his head had already been squeezed by the expanding blood qi, like an exploding watermelon. The scene was very bloody, and it caused the warriors from the Blood River cult to completely break down. In reality, they had already broken down before this. The people under Chu Xiu had already rushed over when Chu Xiu and Duan Lingkong were fighting. They were all veterans who had followed Chu Xiu to fight all over the place, so they naturally did not need to command anything. Shang Tianliang's domain was unleashed, and it was basically a massacre. Everyone's power was not under their control, and it began to burn crazily until it exploded. Mei Qinglian's Red Lotus Hellfire was unleashed. Most of the warriors could not even get close to her, and they were directly burned to death by the hellfire of the Heart Demon. As for Lu Fengxian, when she smashed her halberd, there was almost no one who could withstand a single blow. By the time Chu Xiu killed Duan Lingkong, they had more or less cleared out everyone else. Shang Tianliang looked thoughtfully at Chu Xiu. He could feel that Chu Xiu's power had become stronger again. He had only been in seclusion for a few months. To a mysterious heaven and earth realm expert, who often used years as the unit of measurement for seclusion, this was nothing. Therefore, what Chu Xiu had become stronger was not the foundation of his power, but the control he had over it. The description of the martial immortal realm that Tianhun had told Chu Xiu was very useful. At least, it allowed Chu Xiu to know where his path was, and where he should put his efforts. Previously, Chu Xiu could not use 8 arrows at the same time with the Triple City Annihilation Arrow. Now this was not his limit. Stepping on the mountain that was covered in blood, Chu Xiu continued towards the peak. During this time, not a single disciple of the Blood River Church dared to come down. When Chu Xiu arrived at the peak and saw the hall of the Blood River Church, there was a loud noise. The hall of the Blood River Church collapsed. Ancestor Blood River's blood-red robe fluttered in the wind, and a fierce aura emanated from his body. He walked in front of everyone and shouted, "Chu Xiu, you are courting death." Actually, from the moment Chu Xiu stepped into the mountain and killed the 2 disciples guarding the mountain, Ancestor Blood River had already sensed Chu Xiu's arrival. However, he could not do anything. This was because he was in seclusion. When he was chasing after Lu Jianghe, although Ancestor Blood River did not obtain the Blood Demon Divine Technique, he also sensed the wonders of the Blood Demon Divine Technique. For someone at Ancestor Blood River's level to cultivate to this level without the inheritance of a major sect, his talent was definitely not weak. Therefore, he had already gained some benefits from the things he comprehended during the fight. Therefore, after he returned, he immediately began to cultivate in seclusion and integrated it into his martial Tao. Earlier, when Chu Xiu ascended the mountain, he was at a critical moment, and even if he wanted to make a move, he couldn't leave and could only watch helplessly as Chu Xiu killed Duan Lingkong. At this moment, he wished for nothing more than to swallow Chu Xiu alive. Chapter 1206. Staring hatefully at Chu Xiu in front of him, Blood River Ancestor had actually miscalculated this time. He really did not expect Chu Xiu to make a move. It should be said that from the beginning he did not regard Chu Xiu as an opponent, but rather had scruples about the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Previously, Blood River Ancestor thought that since he had touched Chu Xiu's men, although Chu Xiu would be angry, he would definitely report it to the Imperial Sky Pavilion and put pressure on Blood River Religion. In fact, Blood River Religion was not afraid at all. In the previous martial arts gambling fight of High Heaven Sect, Blood River Religion had actually publicly stood on the side of Cold River City, so they naturally did not care about the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Anyway, they had Cold River City as their backing. Therefore, after Blood River Ancestor finished hunting down Lujiang River, he had no fear and went into seclusion there. However, he did not expect that Chu Xiu would travel thousands of miles to attack him openly. Was this guy crazy? Patriarch Blood River glared angrily at Chu Xiu as if he wanted to skin him alive. I've seen people who have a death wish, but this is the first time I've seen someone like you who has come to seek death. This time, even if your master is a Tao master or a Buddhist ancestor, I will still suck your blood dry, not to mention that your master is the descendant of Gu Zun. Apart from him, Blood River Religion only had a total of 3 heaven and earth profound beings. Yin Shueli had been crippled by Lujiang River, and Duan Lingkong had been killed by Chu Xiu, so there was only one deputy religion master left. Sects like Blood River Religion did not have a deep foundation, and now they had lost 2 heaven and earth profound beings. This could be said to be a serious blow to them. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Seeking death? Many people have said this to me, but unfortunately, in the end the person who died was him. My Chu Xiu's people are not so easy to deal with. Attacking my people in the territory of Kangwu County, Blood River Ancestor, you are also seeking death. I heard that this mountain of yours was dyed red by you? You don't live up to your name. I wonder if you can dye it red with the blood of everyone in your Blood River Religion?" As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, before Blood River Ancestor could react, Chu Xiu had already shouted, "Kill! The entire Blood River Religion will be exterminated, not even a chicken or a dog will be spared." The warriors of the sacred sect behind him immediately rushed out with murderous intent. The intensity of the murderous intent was even greater than when they destroyed the Sabodhi monastery. Since Chu Xiu said he would not leave, not even a chicken or a dog, Blood River Ancestor would not be spared. Patriarch Blood River bellowed furiously, and the blood river around him surged out. The blood river that was several hundred feet long surged behind him, and it was even more powerful and dazzling than the blood river condensed by Duan Lingkong. Although Chu Xiu's killing intent was boundless, his eyes were extremely calm as he observed Patriarch Blood River's true strength. He was a half-step martial immortal, but this so-called half-step only referred to the realm. Although it could affect one's combat power, it was not absolute. Regardless of whether it was the momentum or the power that Blood River Ancestor displayed, he was not as good as Xian Jialua. After all, one of them was a cultivator from an unorthodox background. while the other was a palace master of a top sect in the eastern region, Brahmin religion. He was also the future temple master of one of the 3 temples of Brahmin religion. The endless of Blood River directly shrouded Chu Xiao. In the of Blood River, there were countless ghosts and spirits howling, weakening the power of Chu Xiao's primordial spirit. Its power was far stronger than Duan Lingkong's. The primordial spirit behind Chu Xiao bloomed with golden light. This level of primordial spirit attack could no longer hurt him, especially after cultivating Moriha's illusion. Chu Xiao's mental strength was also a notch higher. Without dodging or evading, Chu Xiao slashed down with his saber. The razor-sharp saber radiance seemed to be tearing the heavens and the earth apart, tearing the Blood River apart. However, at the next moment, the river of blood that had been torn apart changed its shape again. It extended backwards and blocked Chu Xiao's saber attack. After being torn apart easily, it could still change its shape again. In the end, when Chu Xiao's saber light was several tens of feet away from Patriarch Blood River, its power was completely exhausted. Blood River Ancestor sneered and said, "Do you think I'm so easy to deal with? Do you know how many experts of the eastern region's blood has been condensed in this of Blood River? Don't worry. You'll become one of them later." Chu Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. He had really underestimated Blood River Ancestor. The cultivation technique that Blood River Ancestor had researched based on the incomplete Blood River Sect manual was definitely not as perfect as the Blood Demon Divine technique that had been polished and improved by Dugu Weiwei. However, for him to refine his opponent's blood and fuse his power into the river of blood, turning it into an existence that was neither a cultivation technique nor a weapon, yet was able to fuse the characteristics of these 2 attributes, this was truly very rare. Seeing that the of Blood River was crashing towards him again, Chu Xiao formed a seal with his hands, and the 2-sided Buddha Dharma idol appeared behind him. Mahavairokkana was burning with intense Buddha light, and the 3rd eye of Mahakala spewed out endless apocalyptic fire. At this moment, Blood River Ancestor's disciple, Yin Shueli, saw this scene from the chaotic battle and hurriedly shouted, "Master, be careful! This Chu Xiao is also good at Buddhist cultivation techniques." "Bastard! Why didn't you say so earlier?" Blood River Ancestor's expression changed. He wanted to put away his of Blood River, but it was too late. The scorching true sun fire and the evil apocalyptic fire took turns roasting the of Blood River, instantly causing 1/10 of it to evaporate. Chu Xiao's strongest point was not his foundation of power, nor was it his realm, but his understanding of the martial Tao, which was the battle Tao that he had accumulated through life and death battles. His strength had been cultivated through life and death battles, so he was very sensitive to the various martial Tao's battle Tao. Therefore, after exchanging a few blows, he could already tell that Blood River Ancestor's cultivation technique seemed frightening, but it had too many flaws. It was a standard evil and strange demonic Tao cultivation technique that was lacking in grandeur. It was very easily restrained by Buddhist cultivation techniques. The remaining of the of Blood River was integrated into Blood River Ancestor's body. The next moment, the blood chi around him surged into the sky, and a sharp blade appeared on each of his fingers. The blood chi behind him condensed into tentacles that wrapped around Chu Xiao. The formation breaker slashed out continuously, tearing apart the tentacles condensed from the blood chi. However, Blood River Ancestor had already gotten close to Chu Xiao. The powerful sharp blade condensed from the power of chi and blood slashed wildly at Chu Xiao, causing the air to be filled with blood-colored claw marks. However, in front of Chu Xiao's broken formation, even supreme-grade divine weapons were not as sharp and powerful as the broken formation, which was a divine weapon born from the world. Therefore, Patriarch Blood River was still unable to injure Chu Xiao. However, at that moment, Blood River Ancestor's domain spread out, and the boundless blood-colored domain directly enveloped Chu Xiao's entire body. It crazily pulled out the chi and blood in his body, as if it wanted to forcibly pull them out of his body. Chu Xiao's body moved, and his own domain also spread out. The misty domain collided with the blood-red domain, and in an instant, a power fluctuation that could affect the laws of the world erupted, causing the entire Blood River sect to be covered in dark clouds and howling winds. Clashing with domains was actually a very irrational thing to do, but at that moment, Blood River Ancestor sneered and said, "Brat, just wait to be dried up." Although clashing with domains would consume a lot of energy for both sides, Blood River Ancestor was a half-step martial immortal. After all, he would not be at a disadvantage in a clash of domains. However, at the next moment, a change suddenly occurred in Chuxio's divine domain that was strangling the qi and blood. The reversed yin and yang powers of the 5 elements began to reorganize and change. Within the domain, Buddhist light instantly shone around Chuxio. He closed his eyes slightly and formed a Buddhist seal with his hands, as if a benevolent Buddha had descended. At the same time, the entire domain instantly ignited with endless scorching Buddhist flames, evaporating the qi and blood in his opponent's domain. Double domain. Blood River Ancestor's expression suddenly changed. Most cultivators, or rather 99% of them, only had one domain. There were also a small number of cultivators who could condense 2 or 3 domains. Although having more domains did not necessarily mean that one was strong, having more domains meant that the other party's martial path had more changes. Chuxio said lightly, "Double domain? As long as I want it, I can have 10,000 domains." Chuxio did not have 2 domains. He only had one domain, and within his domain, he was a godlike existence. The 5 elements, yin and yang, and the laws of the world would be reversed in Chuxio's domain, and it could strangle all kinds of power. Similarly, as long as Chuxio wanted it, he could also rearrange the yin and yang powers of the 5 elements at will, transforming them into any power he wanted. Of course, he had already mastered this power, just like the scorching Buddhist flames in his domain. No matter what kind of power changed, in the end, it would condense into Chuxio's domain. The scorching Buddhist flames restrained Blood River Ancestor's domain. However, Blood River Ancestor was, after all, a half-step martial immortal. His realm and power were still stronger than Chuxio's. Therefore, he did not retreat. Instead, he mobilized more power, and used the power of his domain to suppress Chuxio. Although most experts in the mysterious enlightenment realm would not use their domains in a battle of domains, he was clearly a half-step martial immortal. His realm was far higher than Chuxio's. Why couldn't he use this power to suppress Chuxio? However, at this time, a strange look appeared in Chuxio's eyes. He said, "Blood River Ancestor, look below. If this continues, your Blood River Church will be killed by me." Blood River Ancestor could not help but look around. The result made him feel unsteady, and he almost vomited blood. Here he was evenly matched with Chuxio. Although it was difficult, he was not defeated. At this time, the Blood River Church was completely defeated. Shang Tianliang had already attacked another deputy, head of the Blood River Church, until he vomited blood. As for the others, it was simply a massacre. Mei Qinglian, Lu Fengxian, Chu Wuji and the others could be said to have attacked with all their strength. Even Lu Fengxian, who had the best character, did not hold back at all. Although Lu Jiang he had a foul mouth, after experiencing so many disasters and burdens together, they had long regarded Lu Jiang he as one of their own. Now seeing that Lu Jiang he was seriously injured by Blood River Ancestor, Chuxio was angry, and so were they. The power of the attack with hatred could be said to be extremely powerful. Chapter 1207. The Blood River sect was the foundation of Patriarch Blood River's life. In fact, Patriarch Blood River was very ambitious. With Patriarch Blood River's strength, as long as he was prepared to join a top sect, he would definitely be able to exchange for the position of the head guest. However, Patriarch Blood River was unwilling to submit to someone else. He would rather guard his Blood River sect alone and slowly develop it than submit to someone else. In the end, the Blood River sect that he had spent hundreds of years building had been destroyed in Chuxio's hands. This made Patriarch Blood River extremely furious, and he could no longer care about wasting time with Chuxio. The domain suddenly expanded, and a powerful force erupted. Blood-colored light shot into the sky. The boundless blood-colored light enveloped Chuxio, constantly compressing his domain. There was even a hint of power in the blood-colored light that eroded the power of Chuxio's essence, soul, and blood qi. Patriarch Blood River gritted his teeth and pushed the power of the blood-colored light to the limit. Specks of blood mist even appeared around him, and fused with the blood-colored light. Warriors who cultivated the qi and blood qi cultivation method paid the most attention to their own qi and blood. Their qi and blood were equivalent to their strength. Now that Patriarch Blood River had fused his own strength into it, it was clear that he was giving it his all. He was prepared to quickly defeat Chu Xiu and rescue the other warriors of the Blood River sect. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes, and a mysterious look flashed through them. Patriarch Blood River's heart was in a mess. When the blood-colored light compressed Chu Xiu's domain to less than 10 feet around him, Patriarch Blood River suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood-colored light shone even brighter, instantly compressing the domain to less than 3 feet away from Chu Xiu. In the next moment, Chu Xiu suddenly gave up on the domain. The violent demonic aura around him swept out, devouring the power around him in a frenzy, including the powerful blood-red light created by Patriarch Blood River. Chu Xiu's body began to grow crazily. In the end, he grew to a height of thousands of zhang, completely shattering Patriarch Blood River's blood light. With a punch, Chu Xiu directly smashed Patriarch Blood River into the cliff. The power of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth dissipated rapidly. Chu Xiu had only used the power of a single punch this time. Therefore, he wasn't completely drained and could still hold on. However, the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth did not kill Patriarch Blood River. Patriarch Blood River coughed up blood as he struggled to climb out of the cliff. He was covered in blood and looked extremely wretched. Divine ability. How could it be a divine ability? Patriarch Blood River was in disbelief. At Patriarch Blood River's realm, he naturally knew about the existence of divine abilities. Moreover, he himself was very eager to obtain a divine ability. Of course, the probability of obtaining one was very small. Patriarch Blood River was born in the wilderness. He did not join those top sects, nor did he have many fortuitous encounters. Therefore, things like divine abilities could only be encountered by Patriarch Blood River. But now he had seen a divine ability from Chu Xiu, a junior martial artist whose realm was far below his. This made him feel indignant and unfair. Seeing that a large number of warriors from Blood River sect had been slaughtered, Patriarch Blood River gritted his teeth and shouted, "Chu Xiu, why are you attacking my Blood River sect? Is the Imperial Sky Pavilion going to completely fall out with Cold River City? If you stop now, I promise you that my Blood River sect will remain neutral, and will never stand on Cold River City's side." In the beginning, Patriarch Blood River attacked with hidden anger. He did not ask Chu Xiu this question at all. It should be said that from the beginning, he did not believe that Chu Xiu would come to kill him with all his strength, just because he was chasing after one of his subordinates. Thinking of the general situation of the entire East region, the relationship between Chu Xiu and the Imperial Sky Pavilion, and the relationship between the Imperial Sky Pavilion and Cold River City, Chu Xiu's arrival today was most likely to help the Imperial Sky Pavilion get rid of him in advance. Chu Xiu shook his head indifferently and said, "Patriarch Blood River, it's actually a little sad for people to live like you. Even if you die, you won't know how you died. From the moment I came up the mountain, I said that Chu Xiu's people are not so easy to deal with." Patriarch Blood River's eyes widened, as if he could not believe that Chu Xiu was really going to attack him for such a slightly ridiculous reason. Seeing that the people of the Blood River sect were about to be killed by Chu Xiu, Patriarch Blood River roared angrily. The qi and blood around him dispersed in an instant. His whole body merged into the void, and turned into an extremely terrifying existence. Without a physical body, his whole body seemed to be melted blood, with a dirty color. "Junior, today, I will not rest until you die." Chu Xiu looked at Patriarch Blood River in surprise. As expected, there was no one in this realm who was easy to deal with. This Patriarch Blood River had actually refined all the qi and blood in his body, and then merged it into his own body. Such an existence could not even be considered a human. Blood demon? In an instant, the endless river of tainted blood enveloped Chu Xiu. The power corroded and polluted everything. Everywhere it passed. Even the energy of the world began to be corroded at a frenzied rate, giving off a charred smell. Patriarch Blood River's eyes were filled with joy. Chu Xiu had destroyed the Blood River sect that he had spent his entire life working on. He wanted Chu Xiu to stay here, and be buried with the Blood River sect. However, at this time, Patriarch Blood River found that there was not the slightest trace of fear in Chu Xiu's eyes. Instead, there was a playful expression on his face. Before Patriarch Blood River could react, Chu Xiu had already formed a seal with his hands. Within the seal, a brilliant Buddhist light bloomed. It was magnificent, dazzling, and extremely holy. A cross-shaped lotus bloomed in the middle of Chu Xiu's hand seal. The lotus was large and clean, untainted by mud. The great redemption of the cross cleansed the world. The resplendent cross-shaped lotus bloomed, and wherever it passed, the Buddhist light shone for eternity, purifying all evil and filth. Under the illumination of the Buddhist light, the tainted blood that Blood River Patriarch had refined emitted white smoke and evaporated at a crazy rate. No, Patriarch Blood River roared angrily, but his eyes were filled with endless fear. He could not resist that power because it was a divine power, another divine power. Patriarch Blood River used all his strength to break free from the shackles of this power, but the next moment, the cross-shaped lotus bloomed, an endless light enveloped the entire Blood River sect. Patriarch Blood River's shrill cries gradually became softer in the endless light, and finally dissipated. Chu Xiu grabbed the air, and a stream of fresh blood appeared in his hand. The fresh blood was extremely pure, like a crystal, and like a living thing. It kept churning in Chu Xiu's hand. Chu Xiu glanced at it, then threw it into his secret space box. This was Patriarch Blood River's soul blood, where his true spirit was stored. Patriarch Blood River could refine all the blood in his body into a filthy state, but only the soul blood in his true soul had to be kept extremely pure. This thing had a certain benefit after refining, but Chu Xiu did not plan to use it himself. Since he had promised to bring Patriarch Blood River's blood back to Lu Jianghe, he would definitely do it. Although all the blood in Patriarch Blood River's body had been purified, this small ball of extremely pure soul blood was more useful than the dirty blood in his body. Mei Qinglian walked over and looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. "Are you okay?" Chu Xiu asked curiously. "What's wrong with me?" "Every time you use a divine power, you look like you've been sucked dry. Why are you fine this time?" Mei Qinglian looked at Chu Xiu strangely, and Chu Xiu looked uncomfortable. "Who's been sucked dry? I'm just overexerting myself." Chu Xiu thought about it and said, "The cross-shaped lotus seal is different from my other divine powers. It can't be said to be weak, but it can't be said to be strong either. This divine power is an inherent divine power of the Buddhist sect. When facing all kinds of evil and strange powers, the cross-shaped lotus seal's power can be maximized. However, when facing other powers that lean towards the yang attribute, the power of the cross-shaped lotus seal is very ordinary." Chu Xiu was very satisfied with the cross-shaped lotus seal that he had comprehended under the Subhuti treasure tree. Although the effects were limited, the consumption was much less than the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. It was completely within the range that Chu Xiu could bear. After destroying the Blood River sect, Chu Xiu counted the losses. In fact, he had not lost many people. It had to be said that the Blood River sect's warriors were still weak. When the Blood River Patriarch was imparting martial arts to these disciples, he seemed to have held back. Most of the Blood River sect's warriors only knew how to absorb blood to cultivate evil techniques, but they did not inherit the Blood River Patriarch's strange martial arts. Right now, the entire Blood River sect was covered in rivers of blood. It had become the Blood River sect in name only. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Let's go to the Imperial Sky Pavilion." Mei Qinglian asked in surprise, "Why are we going to the Imperial Sky Pavilion?" Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Do you really think that we can sit back and relax after destroying the Blood River sect? Cold River City will not let this go. No matter what, we have to get the Imperial Sky Pavilion to help us share the risk." When Chu Xiu said this, Mei Qinglian understood. Share the risk? He was obviously looking for someone to take the blame. When she heard this, Mei Qinglian could not help but mourn for the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Being Chu Xiu's superior was a high-risk job. Li Wuxiang had already been cursed to death by Chu Xiu, who knew how long autumn water could last. Although Li Wuxiang's death was not related to Chu Xiu, the halo that Chu Xiu had of cursing his superior was still very strong. Before Chu Xiu had returned to the Imperial Sky Pavilion, The news of the Blood River sect being destroyed had spread throughout the eastern region. It instantly caused a huge uproar. The Blood River sect was not considered weak in the eastern region. The Blood River Patriarch was even thought to be the most promising existence among the rogue cultivators to step into the martial immortal realm. But now, this hope was killed by someone. That person's name was Chu Xiao. In his hands, the Blood River sect was truly covered in rivers of blood. It became the Blood River sect in name only. Chapter 1208. The destruction of the Blood River cult caused a great shock to the Jianghu of the East region. In fact, Chu Xiao had always been very famous in the Jianghu of the East region. As the successor of Gu Zun, and having defeated Xianyuan Wushuang and Yuan Fu in succession, Chu Xiao had long entered the eyes of the experts in the East region. However, that was only his personal fame. Now Chu Xiao had destroyed the Blood River cult with his subordinates. The destruction of the Blood River cult, which was second only to the top sects in the East region, was a great shock to the entire Jianghu of the East region. When Chu Xiao arrived at the Imperial Sky Pavilion, Lu Sanjin personally came out to greet Chu Xiao. However, after seeing Chu Xiao, Lu Sanjin's expression was a little strange. "Brother Chu, did you really destroy the Blood River cult?" Chu Xiao nodded and said, "This matter has been spread all over the East region. How can it be fake?" Lu Sanjin opened his mouth, but he didn't know what to say. In fact, Ancestor Blood River was not liked in the East region. Ancestor Blood River was evil and strange, and the cultivation method of the Blood River cult needed to absorb the blood of warriors to cultivate, so it was destined that the people of the Blood River cult would not do things with good intentions. However, Ancestor Blood River was very smart. He usually did not attack the big sects and only attacked some rogue cultivators. Although Ancestor Blood River had once aroused public anger, and even attracted many rogue cultivators to attack the Blood River cult, in the end, they either returned without success or became nourishment for Ancestor Blood River. In addition, later Ancestor Blood River turned to Cold River City and had a strong backer, so no one dared to cause trouble for Ancestor Blood River. As a result, now that Ancestor Blood River had died in the hands of Chu Xiao, and the entire Blood River cult was destroyed because Ancestor Blood River had attacked Chu Xiao's subordinate. No matter how one thought about it, it felt a little strange. "The Pavilion Master is waiting for you inside." Now the Pavilion Master is a little emotional, so be careful. Chu Xiao nodded and walked straight into the inner hall. At this time in the inner hall, Zhong Qiushui did not look angry. She just looked at Chu Xiao helplessly. Yes, helplessness. At this moment he somewhat understood Li Wuxiang's difficulties. If he wasn't the Pavilion Master, and Chu Xiao killed Patriarch Blood River, he would definitely clap his hands and cheer. Killing Patriarch Blood River, who was a lackey of Cold River City, would boost the reputation of the Imperial Heaven Pavilion. No matter how one looked at it, it should be a good thing. However, now that he was the Pavilion Master, he also experienced how difficult it was to control a major sect like the Imperial Sky Pavilion in the eastern region. He had just had a head-on fight with Cold River City. Although Cold River City didn't attack him because of his crazy and fearless look, but Cold River City was still eyeing him covetously. In the end, Chu Xiao destroyed the Blood River sect, which was equivalent to cutting off one of Cold River City's arms. Under such circumstances, with Yi Weikong's character, he would definitely not swallow his anger. However, Zhong Qiushui was not Li Wuxiang after all. His character was radical and strong, so he didn't blame Chu Xiao. He just sighed and said, "Tell me, what are you thinking? You killed Patriarch Blood River, and destroyed the Blood River sect. I believe with your character, you must be prepared." Chu Xiao nodded and said, "I'm not really prepared. I just have some ideas to tell you, Pavilion Master." "What ideas?" Chu Xiao's eyes were dark, and he said in a deep voice, "Is the Imperial Heaven Pavilion ready to fight to the death with Cold River City?" Zhong Qiushui's expression suddenly changed, but then he sighed and shook his head. He said, "Ready? Even if we fight to the death, we can't win. What else do we need to prepare?" Chu Xiao narrowed his eyes and said, "Are you ready to wait for death if you can't win? This time, Cold River City will definitely go all out." Zhong Qiushui said angrily, You destroyed the Blood River sect and cut off one of Cold River City's arms. It would be strange if Cold River City didn't make a move. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, Pavilion Master, you're wrong. I killed Patriarch Blood River. Although it will prompt Cold River City to make a move in advance, even if I don't touch Blood River sect, they will make a move soon. I believe Pavilion Master knows Yi Weikong's character better than I do. His ambition can't be satisfied by the current size of Cold River City. Although Yi Weikong is not too old, he is not too young either. As his successor, Qi Wuhan is far inferior to Yi Weikong. Therefore, if I were Yi Weikong, I would destroy the Imperial Heaven Pavilion with all my strength before my strength starts to decline, and divide the East Territory with High Heaven sect. This time, Cold River City will not hold back. I wonder if the Imperial Heaven Pavilion can withstand it. Zhong Qiushui was silent. He definitely had more dealings with Cold River City than Chu Xiu did. What Chu Xiu could see, he could also see. It was just that he was unwilling to face this kind of thing. Tell me, what do you have in mind? Chu Xiu said in a deep voice. There is only one way, and that is to cut off our flesh to feed the tiger, and then drive the tiger to devour the wolf. Zhong Qiushui frowned immediately. Who is the tiger and who is the wolf? High Heaven sect is the tiger, and Cold River City is the wolf. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice. As long as Pavilion Master is willing to cut off your flesh and give up a part of the Imperial Heaven Pavilion's interests to High Heaven sect, I believe High Heaven sect will be willing to make a move. High Heaven sect is the #1 sect in the East Territory. They definitely don't want to see a hungry wolf rise and challenge their position. Zhong Qiushui frowned deeply and said in a deep voice, but doing so is equivalent to drinking poison to quench thirst, fattening High Heaven sect. When they devour our Imperial Heaven Pavilion, won't the result be the same? Don't forget, our Imperial Heaven Pavilion has a great enmity with High Heaven sect for more than 10,000 years. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, people who are dying of thirst, what else can't they drink? Even if it's drinking poison to quench thirst, at least drink it now. And Imperial Heaven Pavilion will have time to develop. If we don't drink it, we won't even have that little bit of time. So as long as Pavilion Master is willing to cut off your flesh, I will talk to High Heaven sect. How much do I need? Zhong Qiushui thought for a long time, and then asked hesitantly. Chu Xiu stretched out a finger and said, a county. Zhong Qiushui was taken aback, but before he could speak, Chu Xiu said, Pavilion Master, you know the strength of High Heaven sect. If we don't pay such a big price, High Heaven sect will think that we are sowing discord between them and Cold River City, and they won't act easily. Zhong Qiushui was much more decisive than Li Wuxiang. Perhaps Imperial Heaven Pavilion was really forced to the point where they had no other choice. Apart from Chu Xiu's method, Zhong Qiushui really couldn't think of any other way. Cutting off his flesh was better than fighting to the death with Cold River City. Moreover, it was indeed better for Chu Xiu to talk about this matter than him. High Heaven sect and Imperial Heaven Pavilion had been fighting since the lower realm 10,000 years ago, all the way to the Daluotian continent. Now Zhong Qiushui really couldn't bring himself to lower his head to High Heaven sect and cut off his flesh to ask them to help him. Although Chu Xiu was nominally a member of Imperial Heaven Pavilion, he was Gu Zun's successor after all. He could stand in the perspective of an outsider and talk about this kind of thing, so it wasn't so embarrassing. After receiving Zhong Qiushui's promise, Chu Xiu went straight to High Heaven sect. In a reception hall of High Heaven sect, Sect Master Fang Yinglong, Qin Baiyuan, and the 3 martial immortal realm powerhouses of Linghu Immortal Mountain were all present. Originally, with Chu Xiu's face, he was not worthy of the 3 martial immortals coming out to greet him together. However, due to the fact that Chu Xiu had just annihilated the Blood River Church and his influence in the eastern region's pugilistic world, and that he had said that he wanted to discuss important matters regarding the entire eastern region with them, the 3 martial immortals had come together. Seeing Chu Xiu at this time, Qin Baiyuan was still a little unhappy with him. Snorting lightly, Qin Baiyuan said, Boy, what important things do you want to tell us? Don't think that you are the #1 figure in the Eastern Territory martial world just because you destroyed Blood River Cult. With the scale of Blood River Cult, My High Heaven sect can destroy it with a wave of our hand. If you don't give me a reason today, it won't be so easy to leave my High Heaven sect. Chu Xiu didn't care about Qin Baiyuan's attitude. His words were earth-shattering and shocked all three of them. My Imperial Heaven Pavilion is willing to exchange a county's land for High Heaven sects, help to curb the expansion of Cold River City. Qin Baiyuan said with a look of disbelief. What did you say? A county's land? Does Zhong Qiushui know what you said? Chu Xiu took out the token Zhong Qiushui gave him and said, This is the secret order of the Imperial Heaven Pavilion's Pavilion Master. It is enough to represent the Pavilion Master's intention. Qin Baiyuan and the other two looked at each other with disbelief in their eyes. The Imperial Sky Pavilion had really gone all out this time. That was the land of a county. It represented a county's resources, a county's talents, and a county's influence in the martial arts world. The price was enough to tempt them. However, this was a major event of the entire Eastern Domain. Qin Baiyuan and the others wouldn't agree so easily. Moreover, they wanted more benefits. Qin Baiyuan narrowed his eyes and said, Drive the tiger to swallow the wolf? You want my High Heaven sect to save your Imperial Heaven Pavilion from its crisis, with just a county's land? Not bad. However, have you forgotten the hatred between our two sects that has lasted for over 10,000 years? Chu Xiu said indifferently. Old sect Master Qin, there's no need to probe anymore. A county's land is the Imperial Heaven Pavilion's bottom line. If your High Heaven sect doesn't help, you'll bear the consequences yourself. Qin Baiyuan was so angry that he laughed. What? If my High Heaven sect doesn't help you, will you attack my High Heaven sect instead? Chu Xiu said in a deep voice. I won't, but Cold River City will. If High Heaven sect doesn't help, the Imperial Heaven Pavilion can't stop Yi Weikong, a 7th-layer martial immortal. Since they can't stop him, they might as well surrender. Yi Weikong's strength is already at the 6th-layer martial immortal. It won't be difficult for him to reach the 7th layer if he goes all out. If my Imperial Heaven Pavilion chooses to surrender, with the Imperial Heaven Pavilion's secret techniques, we can fully support Yi Weikong and push his strength to the 8th-layer martial immortal. At that time, there will be 2 8th-layer martial immortal experts in the Eastern Domain. I wonder, will your High Heaven sect be able to sit still? Hearing this, even Fang Yinglong, who had been incomparably calm, revealed a cold glint in his eyes. You dare? Qin Baiyuan shouted. Chu Xiu retorted. I don't dare, but the Imperial Heaven Pavilion dares. You're about to be exterminated. What else do you dare not do? Groveling and surrendering is better than having your inheritance destroyed, isn't it? Chapter 1209. In the face of Chu Xiu's tit-for-tat, High Heaven sect compromised and chose to agree to Chu Xiu's conditions. Although Qin Baiyuan and the others didn't believe that the Imperial Sky Pavilion, a great sect with tens of thousands of years of history, would choose to surrender to Cold River City, they couldn't afford to gamble. If the Imperial Sky Pavilion was serious, they would be dumbfounded. Qin Baiyuan said in a deep voice. How do you want my High Heaven sect to help you? Don't even think about helping you destroy Cold River City. I can only guarantee that the Imperial Sky Pavilion won't be destroyed by Cold River City. Chu Xiu nodded and said, That's enough. Actually, I only need High Heaven sect to help us once and heavily injure Cold River City. Everyone from High Heaven sect, especially Pavilion Master. You only need to lie in ambush in the southern barbaric land and attack at the critical moment. Qin Baiyuan asked in confusion. Why lie in ambush in the southern barbaric land? If Cold River City wants to attack the Imperial Sky Pavilion, will they give up their headquarters and attack your tiny Kangwu County? Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, Why not? Cold River City didn't fight to the death with the Imperial Sky Pavilion before, because they were afraid of the trump cards in the Imperial Sky Pavilion's headquarters. Now, if Cold River City decides to destroy the Imperial Sky Pavilion, they definitely won't fight to the death with the Imperial Sky Pavilion so easily. Instead, they'll cut off all the Imperial Sky Pavilion's wings first. Among all of the Imperial Sky Pavilion's affiliated forces, I'm the most powerful one. Moreover, I've just annihilated the Blood River sect. Yi Weikong must hate me to the core. It's only normal for him to attack me first. Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Qin Baiyuan looked at Chu Xiu with a strange gaze. To be remembered by a martial immortal level expert was not a good thing. However, at the same time, to be hated by a martial immortal level expert to such an extent, Chu Xiu could be said to be quite capable. After reaching an agreement with High Heaven Sect, Chu Xiu did not delay and immediately returned to Imperial Sky Pavilion to inform Zhong Qiushui to prepare to defend against the enemy in the southern barbaric land. Although Zhong Qiushui had some doubts about Yi Weikong attacking Kangwu County first, since Chu Xiu had negotiated with High Heaven Sect, he could only comply. In fact, Chu Xiu was almost 100% sure about this matter. Because Yi Weikong was a shameless person. To the weak, it was a derogatory term, but to the strong it was terrifying. When such a powerful martial immortal level expert became so shameless, apart from absolute strength, what else could one possibly use to take care of him? Specifically targeting a junior martial art practitioner, like Chu Xiu, was the kind of thing that was hard to hear. However, it was precisely because Yi Weikong was shameless that he did not care about his so-called reputation. Killing Chu Xiu first would definitely be a great blow to the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Just as Chu Xiu was making arrangements, Cold River City was also mobilizing, and all the elites were gathered in Lingluo County. Chu Xiu's guess was very accurate. Yi Weikong was indeed going to deal with him first. For Cold River City, Blood River Church was just an obedient mad dog that bit people. In the past, if Blood River Ancestor had not been tactful and decisively admitted defeat after provoking Cold River City, there would be no Blood River Church now. No matter how mad a dog was, in the face of Yi Weikong, it would only end up as stew. However, even if Blood River Church was just a dog raised by Cold River City, it was still Yi Weikong's dog. Moreover, it was very obedient. Now that it was killed, if he, as its master, swallowed the insult, would there still be a place for him in the eastern region? Therefore, Chu Xiu must be killed. Even if his master, Gu Zun, came, it would be useless. At the top of the city wall at the border of Lingluo County, Yi Weikong was wearing a white brocade robe, but he was wearing a silver-white armor on the outside. The armor was shining with bright starlight, and there were even traces left by sabers and swords. He had not worn this armor for a long time, because it was left to him by Meng Xinghe. It was also made for him by Meng Xinghe when he and Meng Xinghe worked together to establish Cold River City. There was nothing that Xinghe Lu's cultivator did not know. They knew astrology, and they also knew how to forge weapons. Touching the scars on the armor, a trace of reminiscence flashed in Yi Weikong's eyes. In the past, he wore this armor and followed Meng Xinghe to roam the eastern region. They fought their way to a powerful foundation that was comparable to High Heaven Sect and Imperial Sky Pavilion. But now he was the only one left. He once wanted Meng Xinghe to stay in Cold River City, and even asked him to be the city lord, but Meng Xinghe refused without hesitation. Everyone had their own destiny. Meng Xinghe was the successor of Gu Zun. In the future, he would also become a Gu Zun, and live in seclusion in the mountains to pass on his bloodline. Only in this way could he live up to the teachings of his ancestral master. Yi Weikong understood Meng Xinghe. Therefore, even if he was very reluctant, he had to personally send his good friend away. Looking in the direction of Kangwu County, Yi Weikong murmured, "Little Meng, I once told you that I want Cold River City to dominate the eastern region and pass on for millions of years. I don't have much time left. This time let me take the last step." Yi Weikong turned his head and looked at the busy martial artists of Cold River City who were gathering. A cold light could not help but flash in his eyes. No force could last forever. The Imperial Sky Pavilion had enjoyed the legacy of their ancestors for tens of thousands of years. Now it was time to come to an end. In Kangwu County, Chu Xiu was also arranging for people to withdraw from Nan'an Prefecture. Nan'an Prefecture, the previously abandoned prefecture, was connected to the southern land of barbarism. Therefore, Chu Xiu attached great importance to it. Many people were stationed there, and many of them were elites that he had brought from the mortal world. He had spent a lot of effort to cultivate these people. He didn't want them to die here. After Chu Xiu withdrew from Nan'an Prefecture with his people, Yi Weikong immediately began to cross the border with Cold River City, and directly advanced to the prefectural governor's mansion. Along the way, Cold River City didn't encounter any decent resistance. It should be said that there was no resistance at all. It was as if the Imperial Sky Pavilion had given up on this place. Qi Wuhan frowned and said, "City Lord, could it be that Chu Xiu already expected that we would attack Kangwu County first, so he withdrew in advance and prepared to ambush us?" Yi Weikong said indifferently. "Ambush? So what? Wuhan, sometimes there's no need to consider so much when doing things. Use your fist first, then use your brain. In the face of absolute strength, everything else is illusory. If there's no ambush, we will directly annihilate Kangwu County, and then go to the Imperial Sky Pavilion. If he really called Zhong Qiushui and the others over and set up an ambush in Kangwu County, that's perfect. We can directly annihilate all of them in Kangwu County. No matter how strong the ambush is, it can't be more powerful than the Imperial Sky Pavilion's 10,000 years old formation. Can it?" Qi Wuhan nodded in understanding. If Chu Xiu really prepared an ambush, it would instead help them achieve their goal. When the entire Cold River City was directly pushed to the foot of Nan's mansion, Chu Xiu finally stood on top of the city wall and revealed himself. He looked down at the Cold River City's martial art practitioners and sighed emotionally. The rise of Cold River City wasn't without reason. Just by looking at the Cold River City's martial art practitioners below, one could see that each and every one of them was extremely sharp, and their eyes were shining with a strong fighting spirit. Chu Xiu had been to both the Imperial Sky Pavilion and the High Heaven Sect. In the eyes of the High Heaven Sect's martial art practitioners, most of them were arrogant and conceited. They looked at everyone as if they were looking at a bumpkin. It was as if in their eyes, there were only two sects in the entire Eastern Domain. One was the High Heaven Sect, and the other was another sect. As for the Imperial Sky Pavilion, most of the Imperial Sky Pavilion's martial art practitioners actually displayed an indifferent attitude, muddling through life and appearing lethargic. Yi Weikong raised his head to look at Chu Xiu and said indifferently, "You guessed that I would come?" Chu Xiu said, "Of course I guessed. I've killed so many people from your Cold River City. If City Lord Yi could let me go so easily, then you wouldn't be Yi Weikong. Even the monks of Tianluo Bao sect aren't as merciful as you." Yi Weikong laughed heartily and said, "Chu Xiu, to be honest, I actually admire you very much. I'm not being polite, I'm telling the truth. You do things decisively and without hesitation. You kill when you need to kill and beat when you need to. You're very similar to the way I acted when I was young. But it's a pity that you made the wrong choice. Back then, Little Meng and I were able to build a Cold River City that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the great sects that had existed for 10,000 years. But you followed the Imperial Sky Pavilion, and could only fall with them. Don't hide anymore. Call out all the people from the Imperial Sky Pavilion." Chu Xiu could guess that Yi Weikong would come to find trouble with him. Naturally, Yi Weikong could also guess that if Chu Xiu hadn't left, then there would definitely be an ambush in Kangwu County. Therefore, Chu Xiu didn't ask Zhong Qiushui and the others to set up any traps or anything like that. The formations and traps that were set up in a hurry were useless. Zhong Qiushui and a group of cultivators from the Imperial Sky Pavilion appeared on the city walls. He said coldly, "Yi Weikong, aren't you a little too confident, you old fart? Do you really think that the Imperial Sky Pavilion's 10,000 years of heritage and foundation are made of clay?" Yi Weikong didn't get angry. He only said indifferently, "Zhong Qiushui, I admire you very much. If you were in my Cold River City, you would definitely be a top-notch general. But unfortunately, the previous pavilion master didn't put you in an important position, and the current pavilion master is starting to suppress you. How much of your strength can you unleash? Even if you become the pavilion master now, it's useless. The decline of the Imperial Sky Pavilion isn't something that you can turn around by yourself. So what if you have 10,000 years of heritage and foundation? Nothing in this world is eternal. Even the world will be destroyed, let alone a small sect like yours. So what if it was a scheme? So what if it was an ambush? Everything was actually under Yi Weikong's control. He had already made up his mind. This time, it was also the last time he would go all out. He would cut the Gordian knot and destroy the Imperial Sky Pavilion. After that, he would leave everything to Qi Wuhan and the next generation. However, right at this moment, a strange smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face. City Lord Yi is very confident? But sometimes, it's best not to be so full of yourself. Sect Master Fong, it's time for you to make an appearance. Your High Heavens sect won't go back on its word, right? As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, Fong Yinglong stepped into the air. His 9 dragon robes fluttered in the wind, and his aura soared into the sky. Don't worry, the promise of my High Heaven sect is even stronger than a divine weapon. After seeing Fong Yinglong, Yi Weikong's expression finally changed. Things seem to have gotten out of his control. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.